The 2nd of November, 1944, 3:47 p.m., somewhere above occupied Czechoslovakia. Lieutenant Bruce Carr looks down at the oil pressure gauge in his P-51 Mustang. 0 for a pilot. There are numbers that are worse than enemy aircraft. 0 means time is disappearing. Black smoke pours from the cowling. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the machine that carried him through dozens of missions over Europe, is dying beneath him. 30 seconds earlier, Carr was attacking a German airfield. Now he is falling toward enemy territory. An 88mm anti-aircraft shell has torn through the engine compartment and severed the oil line. Without lubrication, the Merlin engine has only moments before it destroys itself. The Mustang that carried him into combat is becoming a dead aircraft. Carr has two choices: stay with the plane and crash, or abandon everything he knows and disappear into a country controlled by the enemy. He pulls back the canopy. The freezing air tears through the cockpit. He rolls the dying Mustang upside down, releases himself, and falls into the gray November sky. Below him is Germany's world, enemy territory, no radio, no weapon except a .45 pistol with 7 rounds. No food, no water, no friendly forces for hundreds of miles. American pilots shot down behind enemy lines faced brutal odds. Most were captured. Many spent the rest of the war imprisoned. Others never returned. Bruce Carr is supposed to become another name on that list, but 4 days later, he will do something almost impossible. He will escape. Then he will do something even more unbelievable. He will steal a German fighter aircraft from an enemy airfield, teach himself how to fly it, and bring it back to Allied territory. The question is not whether Bruce Carr was brave. The question is why. When every reasonable choice disappeared, he kept finding another one. Because the man who would become a legend did not begin as one. Bruce Ward Carr was not born into greatness. He was born in Union Springs, New York, in 1924. There was nothing about his childhood that suggested he would become one of America's most unusual fighter pilots. But there was one moment that changed everything. At 15 years old, Carr discovered flight. A local crop dusting pilot named Earl allowed him to take control of a small aircraft. For most teenagers, flying was a dream. For Carr, it became an obsession. He learned the feeling of an aircraft responding to his hands, the invisible conversation between pilot and machine. He was not learning to become a hero. He was learning how to solve problems in the sky. And history was about to create a world where that skill mattered. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. World War II had begun. The airplane was no longer only a machine. It was becoming the weapon that could decide the fate of nations. By 1942, 18-year-old Bruce Carr joined the United States Army Air Forces. At flight training, something unexpected happened. His instructor was Earl, the same man who first put him behind the controls years earlier. Earl saw something in Carr that others missed: experience, confidence, natural ability. Carr already had hundreds of hours of flight time before many cadets had even learned the basics. By 1943, he was a flight officer. By early 1944, he arrived in England. His aircraft was the P-51 Mustang. At the time, the Mustang represented a revolution in air warfare. It could fly farther, faster, and higher than previous American fighters. With external fuel tanks, it could escort bombers deep into Germany and return. Before the Mustang, American bomber crews often entered German airspace without enough fighter protection. The results were devastating. German pilots attacked formations of heavy bombers that had little ability to defend themselves. The Mustang changed the equation. No American fighters could hunt the Luftwaffe across Europe. Carr immediately connected with the aircraft. The cockpit felt natural. The controls responded instantly. The Mustang was not just transportation. It was an extension of the pilot. He named his aircraft Engel's Playmate. He had no idea that one day he would abandon that Mustang over enemy territory and climb into the cockpit of the aircraft designed to kill him. The 8th of March, 1944, Carr experienced his first real test. He spotted a German Me-109. The enemy pilot tried to escape. Instead of turning away, Carr followed. The chase dropped lower and lower until both aircraft were racing just above the treetops. 400 miles per HR. One mistake meant death. Carr fired, missed. Fired again. A round struck the German fighter. The enemy pilot attempted to escape, but he was too low. His parachute failed to fully deploy. The aircraft crashed. Carr returned expecting celebration. Instead, his commander gave him a warning. He had flown too aggressively. He had risked his life for a target that was not worth the danger. The kill was not officially credited. Technically, the German pilot had destroyed himself. For most pilots, this would have been a lesson. For Carr, it revealed something deeper. He did not think like everyone else. Where others saw danger, he saw possibility. Where others saw limits, he saw questions. That instinct would later save his life and almost get him killed. By the summer of 1944, Carr was flying with the elite 354th Fighter Group. These were Mustang pioneers, the best of the best. Carr became exactly the kind of pilot commanders struggled to control. Aggressive, independent, always pushing beyond the obvious, but there was another side to him. He was not reckless when others depended on him. On the 12th of September 1944, during a mission over Germany, Carr attacked enemy fighters and destroyed multiple aircraft. But when his wingman was damaged, Carr abandoned the opportunity for more victories. He stayed with his injured teammate and escorted him home. The decision cost him possible kills. It earned him respect, because courage was not about chasing danger. It was about knowing when another person mattered more than yourself. By October 1944, Carr had become an ace, 7.5 confirmed victories. A Silver Star, a reputation as one of the Mustang pilots who could be trusted when things became impossible. Then came the 2nd of November. The mission began like hundreds before it. Attack the German airfield, destroy enemy aircraft, return home. But war is built on moments where plans disappear. The shell that destroyed Carr's engine changed everything. His Mustang was gone. His squadron was gone. The map beneath him belonged to the enemy. When his parachute opened above Czechoslovakia, Bruce Carr was no longer a fighter pilot. He was a man alone. He landed hard. The impact twisted his ankle, not broken, but injured enough to slow him down. He buried his parachute beneath leaves. The Germans would search for him. They always searched. Carr had minutes to decide. Most escaped pilots moved toward Allied territory, west, south, anywhere away from the enemy. Carr chose the opposite direction, north toward the German airfield. It seemed irrational. It was exactly why it might work. The Germans would assume he was running away. They would search where they expected him to go. Carr understood something about survival. Sometimes the safest path was the one nobody believed you would take. For 4 days, he moved through occupied territory. He walked at night. He hid during the day. His flight suit provided almost no protection from the cold. His ankle became worse. His body burned energy faster than he could replace it. Day 1, no food. Day 2, he drank from a freezing stream and watched German patrols pass nearby. He stayed motionless for hours, buried in the mud, listening to enemy voices only a short distance away. Day 3, the hunger became unbearable. His body was beginning to fail. And for the first time, Carr considered the option he had avoided: surrender. A captured pilot had a chance. The Luftwaffe often treated enemy aviators differently than ordinary prisoners. There would be food, shelter, a chance to survive the war. It was not victory, but it was life. Carr made the decision. Tomorrow, he would surrender. Then darkness arrived, and with it came something he did not expect, an opportunity. As the sun disappeared over the Czechoslovakian forest, Bruce Carr prepared himself to give up. 4 days behind enemy lines had changed the calculation. The impossible had become simple. He was exhausted, hungry, injured. Alone, the war had reduced everything to one question. How long can a human being continue before survival becomes more important than escape? The answer came from the edge of a German airfield. Carr watched from the trees. Beyond, the darkness were hangars, fuel trucks, aircraft, and enemy soldiers moving through their routine. He had planned to surrender at the main gate. Then he saw something, an aircraft sitting inside a revetment. A Focke-Wulf FW-190, Germany's feared fighter, the machine that Allied pilots had spent months fighting in the skies above Europe. 2 German mechanics worked beneath portable lights. They checked the fuel, tested the engine, inspected the controls. Then they walked away. The aircraft was ready, fully fueled, unprotected, waiting. Carr stared at it. A rational person would have seen a problem. A German aircraft, German controls, German markings, an unfamiliar machine in enemy territory. Carr saw something else. A possibility. The surrender plan disappeared. The decision that saved his life was the same decision that defined him throughout the war. When every option looked impossible, he searched for the option nobody else considered. The FW-190 was not just an airplane. It was a locked door. Carr had to find the key. He waited until 3 in the morning. The airfield became quiet. The darkness covered the ground. Between no cover, no protection. If a guard looked in his direction, he was finished. Carr moved. His injured ankle screamed with every step. 40 seconds later, he reached the fighter. The aircraft was larger than his Mustang. The cockpit sat high above the ground. The German engineering was unfamiliar. But the principle was not. Carr understood machines. He climbed inside and immediately discovered the first problem. Everything was written in German, every switch, every gauge, every control, a cockpit designed for someone who had trained for years. Carr had never flown this aircraft. He had never even sat inside one. But he had something more important than familiarity. More than 500 combat hours had taught him the same lesson over and over. Machines have patterns. Problems have solutions. He studied the cockpit. He identified the instruments, airspeed, altitude, fuel engine controls. Slowly, the unknown became understandable. Then he found the starter. He was not completely sure, but waiting was not an option. He pulled the handle, nothing. He tried again. A mechanical sound filled the cockpit. The inertia starter began spinning. The entire airfield was asleep. Until now, Carr waited, then pulled. The BMW 801 engine exploded to life. The sound was enormous. A 14-cylinder engine producing more than 1,700 horsepower. Every German nearby could hear it. The moment had arrived. No more planning. No more preparation. Only action. Carr pushed the throttle forward. The FW-190 rushed ahead. The aircraft moved differently than the Mustang. Heavier, more powerful, less forgiving. The darkness raced toward him. Hangars, buildings, ground crew, German soldiers emerging from the noise. They were shouting, pointing, but Carr had no time to understand their words. 890 miles per h-hour. He pulled back on the stick. The FW-190 lifted from the ground. Bruce Carr was airborne. A missing American pilot, flying a stolen German fighter 200 miles behind enemy lines. Now he had to survive the second half of the impossible. Jetting home, he could not climb too high. German radar would see him. Enemy fighters could intercept him. Anti-aircraft guns could track him. So Carr did what many pilots would never dare. He flew at treetop level, 50 feet above the ground, nearly 300 miles per h. Our forest below became a blur. One mistake would end everything. A slight miscalculation, a hidden tree, a moment of distraction. The stolen fighter would become his grave. But the same instinct that pushed him into enemy territory now carried him home. Stay unpredictable. Stay moving. Never give the enemy the situation they expect. For 45 minutes, Carr flew west. Then he reached the Allied lines and discovered a new enemy. His own side. The aircraft still carried German markings, black crosses on the wings, a swastika on the tail, 2 Allied soldiers below. He was not a hero. He was an enemy fighter attacking their position. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire. Tracer rounds climbed toward him. Everywhere he looked, weapons were firing. There was no radio, no identification, no explanation. Carr had survived 4 days behind German lines only to be shot down by Americans. So he went lower and faster. The FW-190 dropped toward the ground, 20 feet. The propeller blasted dust into the air. French civilians disappeared into ditches. American soldiers fired rifles. The stolen German aircraft absorbed hit after hit, but it kept flying. Finally, Carr saw his destination, the airfield of the 354th Fighter Group, home, or at least what should have been home. He approached the runway, then discovered the final problem. The landing gear would not come down. He pulled the control. Nothing. Again, nothing. The German system was different. He did not know which controls operated which functions. Below him, Allied guns prepared to destroy him. There was no time left. Carr made another decision. He would land without wheels. He lowered the aircraft, cut the power. The FW-190 struck the grass at nearly 90 miles per h-hour. Mud exploded around the wings. Metal screamed against the ground. Then silence. Bruce Carr was alive. Seconds later, soldiers surrounded the aircraft. Weapons pointed at the cockpit. They expected a German pilot. Instead, the canopy opened. A battered American officer climbed out. Captain Carr. Nobody believed him. He had been missing for 4 days. He was supposed to be dead, captured. Lost instead, he had returned in an enemy fighter. His commanding officer, Colonel George Bickle, arrived and looked at the scene. The destroyed FW-190, the confused soldiers, the exhausted pilot. His question became legendary. Where in the hell have you been? But Carr's story was not finished, because the same decision-making instinct that carried him out of Czechoslovakia would later place him against impossible odds once again. The 2nd of April, 1945, near Schweinfurt, Germany. The war was almost over. Germany was collapsing. But the Luftwaffe could still fight. Carr was now leading a flight of 4 P-51 Mustangs. Then he saw them, German fighters, dozens, above them. A massive formation, Messerschmitt Bf-109S, Foch, Wolf FW-190s, 60 aircraft. The calculation was obvious, 4 against 60. The Germans had the numbers, they had the altitude, they had the advantage. Every rule of air combat said the same thing: leave, report their position, survive. Carr ignored the calculation, not because he did not understand the danger, because he understood it perfectly. He knew what happened when pilots surrendered the initiative. The enemy controlled the battle. So he made the decision: attack. His wingmen followed. They trusted him. The 4 Mustangs climbed directly into the German formation. The Germans did not expect it. The attack, 4 aircraft challenging 60. The enemy hesitated, and hesitation in combat was fatal. Carr entered the formation. A German pilot never saw him coming. His guns fired. The first aircraft disappeared. Then another. Then another. Carr moved through the formation like he had done it his entire life. Target, decision, action, move. Within minutes, 5 German aircraft were destroyed. His wingmen added more. 4 American fighters had entered against 60 German aircraft. They lost none. The Luftwaffe formations scattered. The battle was decided not by numbers, but by one pilot's willingness to make the decision nobody expected. By the end of the war, Bruce Carr had flown 172 combat missions. He became one of America's most unusual aces. He fought in 3 wars: World War II Korea, Vietnam, more than 500 combat missions. Decades after the war, the medals told part of the story: the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross. But they did not tell the whole story. They did not tell about the freezing forest, the stolen fighter, the German cockpit he had never seen, the American guns firing at him as he came home. Some stories are too large to fit on a piece of metal. In 1997, 1 year before his death, Bruce Carr flew. At 73 years old, he climbed into a P-51 Mustang, the same type of aircraft that had carried him through the war. The crowd watched as the elderly pilot brought the fighter low over the runway. Fast, precise, confident. Someone asked him what he was thinking during those final moments in the air. Carr gave the same answer that defined his entire life. What can the airplane do? What can I do? Let's find out. Bruce Carr's story was never only about the fighter he stole. It was never only about the enemy aircraft he destroyed. It was about a pattern. A man facing a situation where every normal answer disappeared. A man who looked at impossible odds and searched for another choice. In the forest, he chose opportunity over surrender. In the sky, he chose attack over retreat. And throughout his life, he kept asking the same question, not, is this possible, but what happens if I try? On the day Bruce Carr died, the battlefield was long gone. The aircraft were silent. The war was history. But somewhere beneath the medals and the records was the same young pilot who once climbed into a German fighter in the darkness surrounded by enemies, with no idea if he would ever return. Only one thing had changed. He already knew the answer. He could.